Boom, 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 boom.
Welcome to the Good Energy Project with Lou Connor, a surprisingly hopeful show about the invisible economic forces that shape our lives, our homes, and our future on planet Earth.
Kia ora, welcome to the Good Energy Project. Today I'm going to be delving into the world of co-housing with Simone Woodland and Sarrah Jayne, who are 2/3 of the core team behind the new Takaka co-housing village in Mohua Golden Bay. This year I've been focusing on the economics of homes and kāinga. I'm wanting to explore how our homes can become centres for connecting, sharing, healing, and restoring our relationships with each other and with the ecosystems around us. It feels wrong to me for people's homes to be reduced to financial assets on the market, to see some people getting hugely wealthy from the property market and many struggling to afford a secure home. The economics commentator Bernard Hickey has joked that New Zealand doesn't have a real economy, just a property market with bits tagged on. This makes sense of the resistance to change. There's a huge amount of power and profit vested in the current system. Sarrah and Simone are part of a nationwide movement to make housing more accessible and communal. Their aim from the outset was to create a community, to make it possible to live well together, forge deep bonds, share resources, offer mutual support in tough times, and tread lightly on the earth. The project has been a race against time and money as COVID struck, building costs soared, and they held tight to the trust and life savings of the 30 or so groups who took a leap of faith to join the project. I think theirs was one of the only co-housing projects to succeed over the last few years. And one of the secrets to their success, they say, was the strength of their core team, made up of 3 women, each of whom were pregnant at one stage of the project. Now, the first of 3 clusters of houses has been completed, and the villagers have moved in. I was lucky enough to visit last summer to attend a wedding of a couple of happy new residents. I was struck by the energy and excitement of this early stage. I bumped into Simone's partner outside their house and had a chat. A little girl skipped past on her way to the trampoline and smiled. Another neighbour popped out for a chat, and they were starting to plan their shared garden. It struck me that this was a profoundly different way to live, and I wondered about joining in. So, to introduce my guests properly, Sarrah is my old friend. We used to live together in a large shared flat in Island Bay, Pōneke, where we spent many late nights around the living room table, dreaming up ideas for future communities and projects. I even remember sketching up an idea for an economic system with Sarrah, where most of our needs would be met by sharing and only a small amount of money would be required. Sarrah is also a yoga teacher, a birth doula, and a facilitator, and I think she's currently training to become a midwife. I met Simone for the first time this summer. The co-housing project is her brainchild. She is originally from the UK and grew up in a little village near Bristol. She's trained as an architect, but struggled to find enough meaning designing houses for rich clients, so she moved into social enterprise. She ran a number of creative social enterprises in Bristol before coming to New Zealand as a Sir Edmund Hillary Fellow on a special visa created for social entrepreneurs like her. So I'm extremely excited to have you both here.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Lou. Lovely to see your smiling face and hear your voice.
Yeah, you too. I don't know if I got everything from the introduction right.
Sounded perfect to me. I'm not quite studying the midwifery bit yet, but could be. Yeah,
could be, yeah. Yeah. And so I wondered if I could start with a sort of slightly random question about your childhoods.
Absolutely.
Can you remember a moment in your childhood where you felt totally happy and in your element?
I have this memory of performing, doing like little dance performances for my family, which was something that I loved to do, and just like putting on a little costume or a little tutu or something, and then gathering everyone around and doing a little performance. And
Do you know how old you were then?
older than 5, definitely between 5 and 9, that kind of age. Yeah.
Do you remember like what you loved about it?
I think I'd started these drama classes when I had moved to Auckland and as it was about 5. And I think in the actual classes themselves, I was still quite shy, but knew that I really wanted to perform. And I just loved that. A bit of a thrill, a bit of energy around it. I think I just really enjoyed that.
That's so nice. What about you, Simone?
What came to mind was when my dad used to take me, my brother, and generally a couple of our friends away camping to, ironically, a place called Woodlands, which is now my last name.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just like an adventure park in the forest, and we would camp there, and Dad would take us there, but we wouldn't really spend any time with him. He'd just hang out with the campsite with our parents, and then we'd just go wild and run free, and there was lots of slides and zip wires and things like that. Just freedom with friends.
Yeah,
in the woods.
cool. Yeah. What did it feel like?
I liked being free.
Nice. And where did you grow up? It was a little village near Bristol, was it?
It's a very small village called High Littleton. Yeah, it's about half an hour drive from Bristol to the south in Somerset.
Is it sort of rural or?
Very rural, I think there's maybe a population of about a few hundred.
Yeah. And you grew up in Auckland, was it, Sarah?
I did, eastern suburbs of Auckland, so quite close to the beach. We always had a beach walking distance from us, but very suburban, surrounded by houses and always had close neighbours. We were very lucky though, the house I grew up in had a bush out the back and a sort of bit of an estuary park across the roads. So we had a bit of that, and then spent all our summers in Coromandel.
Yum. Do you remember when you first became aware of money?
I have this kind of quite distinct memory. I don't know if it was the first time I ever became aware of money, but I feel like I became very aware of economics at this point. So my parents had given us pocket money to spend, right? So you got however much, $20 or whatever to spend at the shop. I had spent mine, but then wanted something. So I wanted a top in a shop or something, a piece of clothing. And my brother said to me, "I'll buy it for you." And I was like, "Oh, great. That's amazing, because I still get to have the thing." And he said, "And then you'll pay me back, and you'll pay me back with interest."
Okay.
And I was like, "What's interest?" It's like, "It's just more. It means that you pay." And I was like, "But why would I pay you more?" When I get the pocket money next week, I'll pay you back. But it was.
So did you go for it or not?
Realizations. I think I did, but then my dad told him off and told him that he wasn't allowed to charge his sister interest. So I got away with just paying him back.
So you had a feeling that interest wasn't right.
Yeah. It was not. It didn't seem quite to
your child brain.
Yeah.
Do you remember, Simone, when you first became aware of money?
I'm not sure about became aware, but I have a story of when I was about 8 years old. I really wanted a pet snake.
Oh, wow.
And my mum was like, "Well, you can have one if you buy it yourself, but I'm not buying one for you." So I spent about 6 months of my life doing jobs around the house for 5p or 20p or that until I could afford to buy a tank and a snake and all the things that you need, like heat mats. And
Did you actually own a snake?
I owned a snake.
Oh my God, that was my childhood
When I was
dream.
8 years
I was
old.
owning a snake. I wanted one so badly, and then was told you're not allowed to keep snakes in New Zealand. It's just not a thing. But you can do.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think it was like determination. I was like, "Oh, I'll buy it myself." Okay.
You've got that in spades, determination.
And did you enjoy the process of earning your snake?
I quite enjoyed, the end result, but I actually really enjoyed the fact that my mum just didn't believe that I would be able to do it, because it was like raising her.
So proving her wrong.
So they're like, "Oh, you don't think I can do this? Watch me."
Have you felt a bit like that during this project?
A little bit.
Yeah,
Oh, really? Another person who can do this? Wow.
yeah. I can imagine that attitude would really come in handy with co-housing.
Yeah, it almost like powers me on if someone believes I can't do it.
Can you tell me about the co-housing project and how the idea arrived?
Yes, I've always been interested in like alternative ways of living and living in tiny house.
Do you know why you were interested in alternative ways of living?
Well, my mum lived in a van, so we kind of grew up in a truck for part of our lives and moved around quite a lot. And then my parents were separated. My dad lived in a house, and it just seemed like my mum was more connected to nature.
Yeah.
Although my dad lived next to beautiful woodlands and things, he never really went into it, whereas my mum lived in the woods.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just seemed like a more connected way to live and less things, spills, less outputs. So yeah, I think it always interests me, and I'm always interested in design and clever design and small spaces. You can actually you don't need a huge amount of space to have a lot of facility. So yeah, those kind of things.
And because you told me that you were a burnt out social entrepreneur when you came to New Zealand.
Yes, so I studied architecture, and instead of doing architecture, because the industry of architecture felt very male, and it felt like it would take me about 20 years of my life before I would actually be able to design anything.
Yeah, okay.
And that just felt a bit too slow for me. And also from spending 7 years doing education, I could really see how there was a lot of students who created all this beautiful stuff that wasn't getting seen other than by their tutors. So I started my social entrepreneurship by creating a publication showcasing graduates' work, and led into pop-up shops and converting old council buildings into studios and art spaces.
Yeah.
And then moved into sort of training young people to develop business skills, so teaching them how to turn their artwork into a product or a they could sell, or work out what service they were going to provide. So yeah,
that sounds very cool. Sounds like they'd be really fun places.
Yeah, definitely very fun, but also very hard work, because you're kind of always working on a shoestring budget.
Yeah.
So you put in a lot of hours because you love it and you love the people, and then you get tired.
Yeah. And then you had a dream of coming to New Zealand?
Yeah, I visited New Zealand in 2013 and 2014, and just fell in love with the place. Felt like home. So, but then went back to the UK and couldn't find a visa that would work for me. So I kind of had to give up on the dream a little bit. But then the Edmund Hillary Fellowship visa program
popped up,
was made live. And it's hilarious. I opened it up and I was like, somebody's written me a visa program. Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you so much. And I got in as part of the first cohort. So yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah. And did you have to come with an idea?
Yes, I came with the idea to create a village retreat space where social entrepreneurs who were burnt out could recoup.
Yeah.
And so the first time we designed the master plan for this site, we kind of included a retreat space. The housing's taking up more space than we thought.
Okay, yeah. So how did it go from that initial dream to what it is now?
I guess the land itself, finding this huge piece of residentially zoned land, I think that informed housing, but also wanting to create the place that I wanted to live.
Yeah. So you're kind of doing the whole thing for yourself as well.
Yeah. Yes, very self-motivated.
Yeah.
Create the life that I want to live in.
Well, it's sort of authentic if you're living in the place you're creating.
Yeah, for sure.
And how did you get involved, Sarah? Well, I'd met Simone when I was in Wellington. I was working a little bit on some stuff for the Edmund Hillary Fellowship. And had, so I was kind of in that grouping of people And we had this, through friends and other acquaintances, we had this time on D'Urville Island together, and that was where I first met Simone, was on the island.
What happened on this island?
We were just a group of people getting together to do process work together, and then Simone kind of showed up with this idea and this vision of this, a mutual friend, Reggie, had said, oh, come along and share your idea, and I just kind of went, oh yeah, and because so much resonance in this types of stuff that we would have talked about back in Island Bay, I don't know, it sparked something in me. It just felt interesting, it felt curious, it felt like, okay, next steps. And so I ended up quitting my job in Wellington and moving to Takaka. And just supporting Simone, like just being kind of, and it was really this sort of like, I just need to work with this person and do this thing. It wasn't like an economic choice. I had a job. I was like very settled in Wellington.
Did you sort of feel called to Mohua Golden Bay as well?
Yeah, so it's interesting. There was a call. So the partner I was with at the time had said, oh, I think we're going to like move to Takaka and do something there. And I said, no, sorry. Like, and no, like if you want to do that, that's cool. But like, no. Also, I knew I wanted to have a child, and I was like, I'm not going to do that. Isolated, away from my support systems, like no way. Yeah, and then fast forward a year later, I had moved and he hadn't. So it was quite a bizarre turn of events. But I do think it took meeting Simone and hearing this vision, and then this cormorant that walked into the room at that point in time, this baby cormorant bird, just like
it's a bird.
As Simone, a shag. Yeah. As Simone was like presenting this, talking about this idea, it just kind of like jumped up on the couch and just sat there.
Gosh.
Okay.
And then we looked up the meaning of that bird, like what it means. And it means like new beginnings and
creation and relations, zest, determination, like all of these things that just felt quite resonant.
Nobody's going to argue with the shag.
You can't really.
So
it did later die, but that's beside the point.
Oh gosh, it died. Oh well, the project has lived.
The omen was there. The project was seeded.
Sarah, I think you described the feeling of being sucked into the development machine or something.
We did a bit. So because we essentially had to become developers. We had to become housing developers, just without profit. You'd sort of said, oh, how did that happen? And what was the point? And I don't think, maybe you could remember a point where we decided to do that. But in my mind, it was like, we never actually decided to be developers. We just started the project, and the project necessitated this, and then it necessitated that, and then the next step, and the next step, and the next step. And so once you were on that track, there was no way for us to build this many houses in this time frame without doing that.
And did it need to be that number of houses because of the size of the land and the cost of the land? Was that what determined that?
Well, the cost of the land, but also the cost of the houses. So there was a secret number that we had to find of number of houses that would make the houses affordable. So you needed to build a certain number so that you could reduce the costs enough to make them affordable. Yeah, and affordable is like, they're still not affordable by many standards. But they sat just below. There's some thresholds for kainga ora. Those types. Kiwi Saver grants and things that we wanted to just.
Because some co-housing groups do it as a community group. Was that an option?
I feel like it was an aspect of what we did.
Yeah, I think because we had so much land and we wanted to build a trust to reserve some of that land, I think if we'd have done it with just the people in neighbourhood 1, then how do we incorporate the next neighbourhoods? And there's like, to allow people to have mortgages, we needed to have a unit title model. So then it kind of went into like home ownership. Yeah, so there just seemed to be like a lot of triggers that we had along the way that kind of forced the outcome, I guess. But also there's some advantages of being a development company over a kind of community group, is that we could make decisions quicker and faster as a team.
Mm.
Trying to make decisions with 34 households about things
If they're each going to choose their taps or something.
yeah. So it definitely made it more achievable because we could move at more of a pace. That makes sense. Yeah, and then
What were the big challenges? That's probably a huge question because it sounds really challenging.
There were lots of, I think, economic challenges and then social challenges. And then some sort of like environmental challenges in terms of not huge ones, because we had quite a good piece of land to build on, like it's quite flat. We didn't discover anything beneath it that was like super challenging. So it was mostly sort of like social and economic challenges, getting fixed price contracts with our major contractors, getting lending, like accessing lending, and then the conditions on that lending. So a developer has a construction loan, and then that construction loan helps to get the houses built. And
so they get a loan from the bank? Or?
So we got a loan from the bank as a business, as a developer, to fund construction, so that then we could release the houses, and then people, whether it's through mortgages or freehold, could purchase their homes.
Yeah, right.
So you can sort of purchase an amount of a home, like you can put a deposit down on a home that's not built yet. You can't purchase a home and hand over a unit title before it's built. If the unit title model kind of led us in that direction of needing construction finance, which was hard.
I think one of the biggest hurdles we had to overcome is that the bank, because we're a profitless developer, they didn't have the profit to lean on, so they had to ask all of our residents to back the construction loan. So,
as guarantors,
right?
Yeah,
so
which is pretty. It's a pretty big ask for someone.
So does that mean they're financially liable if it doesn't work? They have to pay for that construction.
For their home.
Like the very worst outcome would have been that they didn't get a house, and yet they had to pay full price for a house. That could have been.
Yeah.
It would have bankrupted, like the likes of us who have had 80% like mortgages, big mortgages. It would have bankrupted us, and for other people it would have meant they lost their life savings and were going to retirement with nothing. It was
That's
it was
a
big
huge risk for people to take.
A big ask. It required a lot of trust and a lot of
being together, making it happen,
and asking that of people was quite difficult.
Like those actual conversations. Who had those?
We did. We sat with every homeowner and had that conversation with each of them. And for some people it was a no-brainer. It was like, 100%, that's not even a thing that worries me. And for other people that was I really need to sit with this. And for some people it was I can do it, and then no, I can't, and yes, I can, and for like quite a long time. And then for other people, because we were at some point in the project, before we had started to build, we were fully subscribed. We had 34 people, and then this happened, and we lost people, so as a result of that.
Which meant that we had to then
recruit more
and move people around the neighbourhood, because we needed the first lot of houses to be full. To be able to so there was a lot of community input of people moving their house from a different location just to support us being able to move forward, and we managed to find a few people kind of last minute.
And then how did that
jump into that?
How did that fit in with COVID and building costs going up?
Well, because we had a fixed price contract with Signature Homes, we certainly didn't escape the impacts of COVID, but we would never have been able to complete the project without that.
That fixed price.
Without the fixed price, because what it did was sort of lock in a certain amount of those construction costs.
There were still things that were outside of our control that we had to pay extra for, but we had a contingency for those things.
And then the biggest thing was because we'd got this bank loan, then you're paying interest on that, right? So paying 10%. Was that 10%?
Yeah, when we started the build, it was 5.5%, and then a couple of months in, it was 10%.
Oh, wow.
Which was, a huge amount of increase.
So that's where it was a race against time kind of thing?
Yeah, and also our community stepped in again. So we took more loans from our community. People had available assets at 5% to help reduce that extra cost.
So some people had paid for 100% of their home before it was even built, before it had even started to be built. And then we could use that money towards construction, and it lessened our construction loan costs, which lessened the interest. So for a period of time there, it felt like we were constantly going back to people and saying like, hey, I need help if this is going to get over the line.
Was there ever a point where you didn't think it would work?
Not for Simone. There were probably heaps of points where I thought it didn't work, where I was like, how are we going to, I don't even know. I'll just let Simone go away for a while and come back with a genius solution.
Problem solver.
Simone's
we've had quite a few problems.
A huge, powerhouse of a problem solver. Like I don't think I've ever met somebody who can solve such complex problems so quickly and with
amazing
solutions. Pick things that are like, okay, this is going to work for this and this and this person, and there were a lot of those moments.
And where did the babies fit in with all of this?
Oh, they just kind of came along.
Man, all three of us have got babies.
Bonnie. No, me.
You.
Me.
It was you.
I was. Well, they already had kids.
Yeah. Oh, how many kids do you have, Simone?
I have a 5-year-old and an 11-month-year-old.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then our colleague had one already. They're all girls, all of them.
Oh, wow.
All of the daughters that came in this period of time.
Yeah. So the three mamas had lots of daughters.
Yeah. And I have this memory of right before, a couple of weeks before I went on maternity leave, asking people to sign this paperwork, these guarantees, these really intense conversations, and being very pregnant and quite emotional, and just being like, would you just having these feelings arising in me, would you just sign the piece of paper so that I can go and have this baby? There was intensity. There was definitely. Yeah. But I remember also feeling super grateful that I was working with these two throughout my whole pregnancy, because it was a very challenging pregnancy, and I had that support of these two wahine, just kind of I get to show up and have a cry and talk about it, and they knew what I was on about, and it was great. I can't imagine working a corporate job or doing something with somebody else during that time.
Yeah, special time.
Yeah,
that's amazing that even though so much was going on, you're able to hold all those problems as well as all the emotions of being pregnant and everything.
But it's that funny thing, right, where that, I don't know, I feel like there's this stigma around women and pregnancy and periods and emotions and all of these kind of things. It's well, we're still capable of really complex thought and problem solving, and none of that, they're not exclusive to each other.
Was it the only co-housing project of its size that has been successful over the last few years?
Yeah, sadly.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, Toi Ora was built.
Toi Ora came before us. Yeah.
Where was
before
that? Where's
COVID, that? In Dunedin.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think there's been lots of smaller groups that have kind of 4 or 5 houses on a piece of land, and little eco neighborhoods.
Yeah. Do you know why is it so hard?
Well, I think the things that saved our project in that time was the fact that we had a lot more land than we were developing. So we had a lot of land to use as security. That land could have been subdivided, and which meant it was safe for people to loan us money because we had a way of paying it back.
A lot of projects don't have that, especially if they're in a more urban space. They don't have the luxury of more land. They buy the amount of land that they're wanting to build on.
Yeah. And what about I think you mentioned that it's the system is set up for developers but not set up for co-housing. What is it that could be better?
There's lots of different initiatives in Europe for collective housing. I think it's in Austria that the government sets aside land for collective housing, and like financial models in which they can borrow for collective housing, and just like systems in place for people coming together and building the housing that they want. Whereas we've had to sort of fit into a model that isn't for collective housing,
Yeah, right.
and try and make it work and adopt things.
And spend hundreds and hundreds of hours explaining things to people.
Yeah.
And like going back over things and like, oh, but this isn't going to work because we're not.
Is this like councils and banks?
Yeah, councils, banks,
Lawyers, accountants.
Mm.
They're like, huh? You're doing what?
Yeah, what do you mean? There's no mechanism for how this works. And because we were combining the land trust and the unit title model as well, there had been a bit of research done by a lawyer in Auckland, I can't remember his name, who was researching the two models. And I think we were one of the first projects in the country to put the two together and kind of say, look, we are actually also going to have a trust that's independent from these unit title models that is going to own land. And we want that to be charitable and to have charitable purpose and these things. So yeah, there was a lot. Yeah, I wouldn't say that we've necessarily had huge impact on the systems or changed the systems, but I think you always change something through intersecting with it. Like,
yeah.
I hope anyway.
Well, I heard on the radio this morning that one of the banks is doing everything they can to make co-housing and papakainga developments more possible.
Oh, which bank was that?
Westpac, I think.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Westpac have been involved in supporting papakaingas.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe it is getting out there.
Yeah. Hope so.
Yeah, that's an interesting thinking about papakainga. And one topic that I've been really interested in is kainga and traditional kainga and the relationship of people to the land and to their home. I'm hoping through this project to kind of support the work of Māori in recentering kainga in the economy. Yeah, I'm really interested in like what you're doing is I think it could have some synergies with that. And I think I heard one person talk about how you going through this sort of gauntlet of trying to make this work sets a precedent that could also support papakainga to be more successful. So it sort of feeds each other.
Yeah, I think as papakaingas develop and co-housing develop, if something works for somewhere, a different council say, then we can start borrowing ideas and using it for, developing collective housing wherever the scale
and
it is.
I think there's like a mindset change of like, a house can be not just an individual thing, it can be like a place to connect or something. It's like, I like the idea of you being part of a nationwide movement. That's what you told me yesterday, Sarah. I like that.
Good. Yeah, I like that idea too. Yeah. And it's certainly when you show up to the kohohui and like places where like you've got people trying to do this type of thing or gathering together, or they're like, what Solar Roses, a woman in collective housing.
Oh, that's cool.
Retreat spaces and stuff. And it's just like, like there are other people trying to do this and wanting this. And, I think the tiny house movement has contributed to it as well in like, different ways.
I've been doing some presentations around the country, and I've actually had whole groups of people cheer. This is what we need.
Amazing. Yeah.
When I've talked about the trust model and the housing and how it all connects and things, and it's just really interesting to see that this is wanted.
It's
just how to make it happen. A lot of people are trying to do it on rural land, and that I think is a hurdle that we kind of skipped, the kind of needing to rezone the land.
Rezone it. And that's an issue.
Yeah, that's a really challenging thing to do. So we had that, finding a large piece of residentially zoned land was kind of, it was too big for us, but it was also too big to give up.
so you just had to you just had to expand your vision a little bit.
And it wasn't like at the time buying the land, to sort of go back to the beginning for a second, like it was not something one individual could have done alone. So even Simone and Reggie, who was involved at the time, didn't have residency yet, couldn't even put the deposit on the land.
Right.
So another local couple who'd been here and involved adjacently with the project said, okay, we'll take this risk initially and then you'll raise the rest of the money to actually buy it. It was from the beginning, a very sort of collective leap of faith in a way, or act of trust, I think. And I think this was something that just kept coming up throughout the project, certainly for me, and I think for lots of people, to be wanting people's trust. We needed people to trust us that we could get this done, and we could do that internal process of somebody to trust us, or to trust each other, or to trust, and I think as the actual living together develops, that is going to keep showing up in many different ways for you guys as well too, probably.
One of the things I like most about that story is the fact that we paid 10% deposit of the land, and we gave ourselves 9 months to find people who wanted to live with us on this piece of land. And it was a bit like growing a baby.
9 months
to raise something million, $1.1 million.
And it gave us that time, knowing that we had this piece of land to work out what it was going to be, what it was going to be like, find the people. And so I think it's really hard to do co-housing until you know where it's going to be.
And to a certain extent the people, because we say it wasn't a community, every decision wasn't made communally, but we did in the beginning, we did have a subset of people who had loaned us money, who believed enough to go, I think this is something I might be into, to start a design process with. So we did start design process with a group. It wasn't just us going, we think maybe this. It was get this group together, do some permaculture stuff, do some workshops, do some hui to come together and explore these things. And it also, what was cool about it was that it wasn't just, I've talked to some projects where they've got someone who's willing to buy the land, and then they're trying to find the community around it, or they already own the land, or in Papakainga, the iwi or the hapu own the land, and then they're sort of molding the people. And what was cool about this was that it wasn't just one individual. It was all of these different individuals putting different talents to make it work.
It was really cool to visit in the summer, and I had this real feeling of we've just moved in, what's going to happen in this space, and the gardens were just being established, and I think the community house was still in construction. But what's it like? Because another thing is, I think, Sarah, you initially were living there and have now moved out due to a relationship thing. What's it like now, both living there and not living there?
From the perspective of living there, it's beautiful. From my walk from my house to the car, it takes about 30 seconds, and I would guaranteedly have a little chat with somebody, wave at someone else, and say hi to somebody. It's all those little bump points that are really beautiful. We're still developing our gardens. We're starting to work on central gardens, but it's slow, and that's okay because we're going to be here a long time. So it's all slowly developing. I quite like walking around the loops of the neighbourhood when I push my daughter to sleep in the pram, and I'm
nice.
Someone's planted something else, and these things are happening. We're having potluck sporadically, and we're still waiting for the common house to come online. So hopefully that'll be next month. And I think that'll be a huge, gear change for us being able to connect as a group.
And will you have events there?
Yeah, we'll have potlucks and meetings, and I expect we'll have events that for people outside the community can come visit too. But we haven't kind of.
I'd like to come to a sing along.
Okay,
or a Kaylee.
Oh, a Kaylee would be even better. Yeah.
I think we're planning a Kaylee as our first.
Oh, amazing! Yeah. And what's it like for you, Sarah? I imagine there's sadness and.
Oh, it's a real kind of mixed bag. So I don't know how many months ago it was now, a few months ago, I sort of finished my time working for the project, and also had the breakdown of the relationship and had moved out of the home that I was living in there, and had made the decision to sell the house that we'd bought together we couldn't afford the mortgage and to continue sort of to keep it. So there's practical reasons there. But it was also an interesting time for me, that whole sort of like moving in. I moved into this home that I'd spent a long time dreaming about and thinking about. And I didn't have that resonance of like, this is home for me. And that I think was quite a hard thing to sit with. I've spent so much time and energy and much faith in this project and in these people, and I still love it on many levels, and obviously love the people, loved being Simone's neighbour, and we dreamed about being neighbours. But I had this kind of deeper sense of like, this isn't home for me, and that was really sad. But also like sitting with a huge amount of gratitude that it exists, but also then my life took a turn and I live in an amazing home now with my partner and my baby part-time and another couple of women, and it's just a big, queer, lovely household. Lots of dogs.
And nice. And that's quite close to the co-housing village?
It is. It's like a 5-minute drive, or like would be like a 20-minute walk if I ever walked it. But and I'm spending time there as well, dropping off my daughter and picking her up and that kind of thing. And I imagine in the common house, so I really I want to teach a yoga class in the common house. So I feel like I'm sort of lucky in a sense, is that like I've found this community, this much smaller pocket of community that works for me, because I think I did kind of know this as I was going along, but didn't want to accept that like because of the unit title model, the way the co-housing is built is that they're individual households intersecting with a whole. And I had always come from this like shared house.
Like the big shared house.
Thing. And we lived together, and it was like
and it's sort of a non-nuclear family kind of setup.
It's an alternative kind of family, sort of extended family sort of structure, and have been polyamorous in that space as well. And so I think like having it I think there's kind of a different need that I had around like having a bigger household where different pockets of people and people intersect in different ways. And like I have that now in a different way, but I also have access to this like great community. So I think it's kind of a tribute for like how this community can intersect with the wider community. So now I feel like in this like wider Golden Bay or Mohua community where I live up in Motupipi and had this little, this lovely house, and then it's like I come down and I visit, and I want to use the common house, and I want to be invited to events. And
you're an honorary member for life.
Well,
I'm life status.
It kind of leads into a question I had around how the influx of people is and could change the community and economy. Because I imagine it's quite a large amount of new people to come into quite a small village, quite a small area.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of good people moving in. There's a lot of people that are volunteering or being involved in wider community events, and
and they're not all people coming from out of town. We do have people who've bought into the co-housing who've been living in the Bay for 20 years or so there's definitely like people who were just excited to have a new home and a home in co-housing that already lived in the Bay. But then there were these people who are coming from bigger cities, and I think I was talking to you about it, Lou, how like it affects the economy in different ways, because it's like we've got people volunteering and they're bringing their skills and they're bringing these types of things. There's like nurses who are like coming and then working locally and they're needed, or mental health workers who are sort of needed. But then there's also these people who are like earning money because COVID changed the whole system up somewhat. There are people earning money from government jobs or jobs working in Auckland or elsewhere who are working online.
And bringing money into the community.
Into, they're shopping at the local supermarket, and they're buying all local goods, and they're spending their money here essentially. So it's an interesting.
What's the reception been like from the local community? I imagine it's a bit mixed.
It was definitely mixed at the start. We had a lot of I think someone said that we were going to build some sort of hippie slum. at
Okay.
the start. And yeah, a lot of people don't like change.
Mm.
This paddock's been a paddock for a long time, and
Mm-hmm.
now it's a paddock
No,
with houses. Yeah, but I think I did a presentation last night for local people about what's coming next, the next phase, and there was nobody questioning why we're doing it. It was just people who were interested in what we're doing. So I think now that people can see what we've built, they can see that it's good quality, it's nice housing, and they're getting to know the people who live there and realizing that, yeah, we're not all that bad.
I think, Simone, that you've got to know, is it Mairangi? Maihana?
Her name is Mairangi, yeah.
Oh, she's from
and
the Maihana family?
she is one of the elders of the Mahana family, but her last name isn't my.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But the road here is Mahana Street, so our co-housing development is 43 Mahana Street, and her great grandfather was Chief Te Mahana, who would have kaitiaki'd a lot more land than just the piece we're on. And she can remember that her grandparents living in a homestead on the land and farming the land. So that piece of land where the homestead is on the trust land, and we're building or planting a Mara garden there to honour the whānau that would have been here and create a space which she and her whānau can come back on the land.
Because you said that you bought it from a farmer and they had it for a few generations, and before that it was Māori land?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. And I was struck by that you have a relationship, and she's in her 80s, is she?
Yeah, Mairangi's in her 80s. I pop over to her house probably about once a month and have a cup of tea and hang out. And yeah, she's a bit like a grandmother to my two children. Very sweet.
Yeah. And what about the land itself? Like, you've got ideas for planting and restoring?
Yeah, so the trust, one of its main objectives is land regeneration, so planting trees and restoring the natural bird life. And we're currently focusing on the housing and getting that done. But then the trust will have more time and energy to sort of look at land regeneration and sustainable education.
That's cool. Yeah. And I wondered about whether you have any dreams or visions for the future.
Build a wellness centre for living and
build this
birth
birth and death centre.
Yeah. Tell me more. A birth and death centre.
Yeah, it was a kind of interesting thing that came up in this process for me, was this sort of like feeling like this was kind of in lots of ways Simone's dream, and then kind of going like, what is that thing that I want to do? Like, what is that real call to something? And it's funny because I haven't, you know how when sometimes you have a call to something, but then you know that it's not the now thing, and so it just kind of has to like sit in the background for like
gestating or something,
quite a long time sometimes. And so yeah, there is this idea of having a birthing and dying centre that is it brings together a physical centre where people can go and be in that birthing space, and also, you know, be in the dying space, which have like a lot of crossover in terms of needs, in terms of like physical structure, and you know, you need bed, these things, and you need place for whānau to be, and you need care workers, doulas of different kinds, midwives, hospice workers, places for them to kind of intersect, and education around that sort of thing, because I feel like both birthing and dying has been something that has been taken out of the home and put into institutions and places that are not necessarily set up for. Hospitals are not actually set up for birthing or dying. They're set up for, you know, getting people well you know, when they're unwell, and that's like an amazing structure. They do really, really well at that.
And then they don't sort of take into account the spiritual significance of that time.
It's the spiritual, and also some of the more like baseline sort of physical needs, like they can be really focused on alleviating pain, but what about just like physical comfort? Like I'm reading this book at the moment called Death Nesting, which is just all about like lots of different things, but one of them is how do we offer physical and mental and emotional comfort during this time. And then I've done like quite a bit of work in the birth space, and it's very similar. Like you need to feel safe, you need to feel comfortable, you need to feel in order to relax and let go. And then that letting go process is what happens in the birthing, and then happens also with the dying. So yeah, I don't know.
The letting go.
A centre for letting go, a centre for transitions, a centre for like, there have been lots of different names thrown around. But the really funny thing is, as I met people during this project, and some of the people who've come to live here, from midwives to birth workers, people who work postpartum, and then there were just, so many people sort of saying, oh, wow, actually, that's an amazing idea. I'd be so interested in that. I'd love to contribute to that. It's had this kind of life of its own that's just been toiling away in the background. So I don't know. One of the calls to becoming a midwife was like, oh, maybe that's the first step in this process. I don't.
Yeah. Well, it strikes me that you never know what happens when people come together. Like you two met on some island and a co-housing village came out of it. So who knows what will happen from having a whole village.
I know, yeah.
Exactly.
Do you have any dreams or visions, Simone?
Well, I imagine that we're kind of at the stage where we've moved in together, and now that we're kind of at the stage of thinking about things like saving pools, or what do we do with money, maybe setting up businesses together, that kind of, I think that's kind of the future of what might happen. There's already couples who've bought businesses together and are starting to do things, and it's cool to see things blossoming, and they're really cool not to have to do them or like initiate them.
Simone's dream is to not have a project. For a minute.
Just sit back and relax and watch everyone else busily working on theirs.
Yeah, I actually really love going to community meetings because I no longer host them. And I'm like, I'm just a member. And
look at me just sitting there.
Oh, yeah, because I had an underlying question about social entrepreneurship, which is, do you think it's possible in our current system to do social enterprise or do like business that is for the benefit of people and for the planet without burning out? Do you think that's possible in the current system?
I don't know if it's possible. I guess I think people who get into social entrepreneurship are people who put others in front of themselves as a natural way of being, I guess. And when you continuously put other people in front of yourself, you eventually burn out.
Maybe in the current system, though, because maybe there's another environment in which you put other people first and everyone else is doing it as well, and everyone's just like, oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's a context problem.
That's kind of the interesting thing, because I feel like in some points in this project, what saved us from burning out was having each other behind each other. And even when like both Simone and Bonnie were on maternity leave at some point.
Sorry, Sarah.
Very difficult time for me.
Okay.
Very close to burnout. It was, I felt, so we had this board member who was also a community member, who's also has a history with co-housing and an amazing supportive wealth of knowledge, kind of like stepped into that role and went, hey, I've got you, we're going to do this. I'm going to take this off your plate. Yeah, so I do believe that there is a way to, when you've got the right group of people together, to sort of support each other in a way that, but it's an internalized thing, right? Like systems, the problem is not so much the system that exists out there, it's the way we internalize those systems in ourselves. So like I noticed that in myself. It's nothing to do with any external system, the reason why I might burn out, but it's this internal pattern that lives within me that has just been like accumulating over time through interacting with the systems around me, that then tell myself that I'm not enough, or I'm not good enough if I'm not working this many hours, or if I'm not working, I don't have purpose, or I'm not, some of the members of my household at the moment, it's like, oh, like, am I still like a worthy person if I'm not like holding a job? And yet there's so much that they do in the household and in childcare and in all of these things. So I think everything being valued and having like so I see that being possible in the co-housing in some ways.
I've had this idea of a wildlife sanctuary where the wildlife is mainly people, but it's just a sort of like slightly protected little environment where people can flourish because there's different understandings of how we are together. And yeah, and I like the idea that the co-housing village could become that kind of wildlife sanctuary too. Because, like living in Wellington here, I live in the city, but it's just full of birds because they're all being pumped out of the wildlife sanctuary. And I like the idea of the co-housing having a different way of being, and so then just like birthing
People out.
birthing a new.
Like it's like, what are our kids going to be like growing up in this environment?
Yeah.
Too, like, yeah. I already know my 2-year-old has so much. She has so many people in her life. Like, she has so much support from all angles, and we're lucky to have extended family here as well. And then it's like multiple parents, and then Nana, and then all of these aunties and uncles and all of these kids around, and it's pretty incredible.
Shall I ask my final question of you two?
Do it.
And if you can imagine you're 80 years old and you're sitting in a very comfortable chair, surrounded by all the people you love and looking out at a beautiful view, and looking back at your life, what do you feel most proud of?
Connecting people. Yeah. One of my favorite things now is to look out of my window and watch other people having great interactions. Just, like laughing their heads off together, or helping each other with a shopping, or
nice.
I think adding value to other people's lives in a social context.
Then you can slip out and everyone will be fine at the end of your life. Preferably in the birth and dying centre.
Yes, in the letting go centre that Sarah runs. That's where I'll be.
I'll be there with you. Yeah. Maybe it'll be maybe it'll be that. I think that the sort of thing that came to mind for me is like through all of and potentially the shit that's coming as well. To have maintained so much joy and laughter and pleasure in my life. To have had such deep relationships and so much pleasure and so much joy. That's really like, I think, the thing that I would look back and think like, I did life. I lifed it. I lifed it really fucking good.
I lifed it good and now I'm dying.
And I'm like partying on the way out because I know that death is like, because I've been with death so much that I know that it's like a party.
Nice. Well, do you have any last things to add? Any important points that you want to convey? Or maybe you could.
And we did through magic.
What was that?
I said we're all really like just witches, like just magicking up the stream.
We just manifested it. I guess as a little sales.
Do a sale pitch.
We have 2 new neighbourhoods coming online in the next couple of years, and we're taking interest already. We already have 8 people who have invested in the next neighbourhood, and more people who are interested, and we're starting to build the next neighbourhood already. So we're not physically, we build the community before we build the building.
Cool.
So we're bringing together neighbourhood 2. So if people are interested, to reach out.
And they should reach out by going to your website or getting in touch with you.
Website would be a good place to start. It's takakacohousing.co.nz. And there's an expression of interest form that you can complete, which lets us know.
Amazing. Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's a wrap.
Yay!
That was the Good Energy Project. If you'd like to access more interviews, writing and illustrations, you can find them at thegoodenergyproject.substack.com. The shows are also available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.